Good morning. I know we've done a number of videos, and you guys are just inundated with videos of different fly patterns. One more may confuse you a little bit, but we're going to do it anyway because I found a pattern that I really like. I think it's going to be a killer redfish pattern. I like it a lot. It is called the Marsh Mud Minnow. Here's what this puppy looks like. And it's got some similar materials to other redfish flies that we've tied, but it's got a couple of little differences, but it's really a cool little fly. We'll show you how to tie this one. We're going to be using some 140 denier ultra thread and a chartreuse, and we're going to start maybe a little bit back further behind the eyes, maybe an eye and a half back with our first thread bump to create our cradle to house or support our dumbbell eyes. And we're going to make 2 bumps there. And the purpose, as I've mentioned before, is to give us a place for the dumbbell eyes to rest so they don't slide up and down on the hook shank. So it's going to sit right in the cradle like that. It won't slide up and down. So I'm going to be using actually these are large lead dumbbell eyes, double pupil dumbbell eyes. And I didn't have any medium lead eyes, so I'm going to use a large. This sucker is really going to drop fast and get that fly down onto the bottom where the fish are looking. So tie that in with a couple of wraps on one side and a couple of wraps on the other. Back and forth in different directions. After several cross wraps, we'll check and make sure that the eyes are on their square. And now we got to even up the side. You see it's tilted a little bit on the side towards me. We're going to make some wraps to bring that back into alignment. There we go. And then wraps the other way and keep going back and forth, making sure that the eyes sit perpendicular to the hook shank. And then go under the eyes and over the hook, under the eyes, over the hook. A number of times what this does is it pulls those thread wraps that we used, the cross wraps, it pulls those down against the eyes and secures them in place so they will not move. Nothing's worse than getting a fly back and having the dumbbell eyes spin on the hook. Okay, now a little bit of super glue will help that. So we've got some Zap-A-Gap. We're gonna brush on the top and the bottom. We're going to wrap our thread back into the bend of the hook. Just start down the bend a little ways. There we go. And our first material we're going to use is a medium polar chenille in a chartreuse. I'd really like to have some large, but I don't have any, so I'm going to use medium. And tie that in on that bend. Advance your thread almost up to where the bend starts, and then we'll wrap this medium polar chenille with touching wraps up the bend of the hook, trying to stroke some of those fibers rearward. It's kind of tough. These things kind of go everywhere. Okay, one more. I'll tie that off. Keep in mind as we're tying this fly that with the dumbbell eyes, it's going to ride hook point up in the water. So it's going to be upside down from what you see here in the vise. Snip that off. Stroke our fibers back as much as we can and clean up that tie down. Okay, our next material is going to be some tan craft fur. And as I've mentioned before, the best way to deal with this, if we just take the craft fur and pull it up and try to cut it off the hide, then we end up with a big mess and our hide just turns to poop. But this is much easier. We can control the amount of craft fur we're using. So what I like to do in this case is cut off about a 1 inch by 1 inch chunk of the hide. That way we know how much craft fur we're going to get. So, and it's consistent from fly to fly. So pull all that craft fur down away from the hide and get a grip on the craft fur with your thumb and forefinger of your left hand, and then cut the hide free. There, the hide's free, throw that away. Now we can pinch all that together and get a grip on it with our left hand. If you notice, we've got all this under fur. This is really thick. If we try to tie this down, it's going to be a big mess. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a comb, and we're going to comb out all that under fur. And just a few swipes with the comb will get us a pile of under fur. Look at that. Can you imagine trying to tie that down to the hook? It's really a mess if you do. So keep combing, get all that under fur out. There we go. Now take your fingers and pinch that together, and we're going to cut that off with a fairly square cut right there. Do that off camera. Okay, now we're going to tie that down in front of the polar chenille. One loose wrap, tighten it up right on top of the hook. Tie all that down. That gives us kind of a square edge up there to work around. So let's build up a little thread ramp to get us over the edge of that craft fur. This will, it's not necessary, but it's going to help us with the other materials we're going to tie in. There we go. So we've got a nice taper there. Okay, before we tie down another material, let's bar this, put some barring on the tail. So I'm going to use black in this case, black Copic marker, use a Sharpie as well, and just bar each side. I put 4 bars on there. You can put as many or as few as you like. There we go. Next would be some flash. And I'm going to use some pearl crystal flash. And if you only want to buy one color of crystal flash, buy the pearl. This stuff is great. It kind of takes on the color, or reflects the color of any other material you've got on the fly. All right, so wrap that around your thread and even out both sides of the polar flash and tie it down on one side of the hook. Take half of that bundle over to the other side. I'm using, 4 to 6 strands of crystal flash will do it. Wrap that back to the base of the tail. Okay, and what I usually do is trim that off to almost maybe 3/4 the length of the tail. There we go. Now our next material is really cool stuff. It's some hollow polar chenille. And this stuff this is in a silver and gold. This has all kinds of sparkle. And I get this stuff from Bass Pro Shop or Cabela's, same thing. And so we'll tie that down right ahead of the tail. I'm going to put on about maybe 1/4 inch of this stuff. As we wrap it, good luck, try to stroke those fibers rearward. It's tough because this stuff is, I say it's like Beetlejuice hair, it just goes everywhere. Make touching wraps. This stuff has so much sparkle. I love it. I love the way it looks in the water. Okay, we can tie that off now. We had about 4 or 5 wraps of this hollow polar chenille. We've got quite a mess there now. It's going everywhere. So take your fingers and stroke that stuff back. And wrap back over it so it directs those fibers rearward. Just like that. Pretty cool stuff. Now it's time for some legs. We're going to use you could use any sort of rubber leg you want to. I'm using some chartreuse, just plain chartreuse, or not barred or anything. I'd prefer to use barred, or you can get some two-tone, pretty sexy legs you want to use, but I'm going to use just plain chartreuse rubber legs, silicone flutter legs, because that's what I have. Wrap those legs, 2 legs here. Wrap them around the hook and tie it down on one side. Then take 2 of that bundle over the other side, tie it down in such a way as that the legs run right down the side of the hook shank, right back to the base of where you tied on your hollow polar chenille. And then trim those legs slightly shorter than you trimmed off the flash. Now we'll clean up that tie down, or the legs. There we go. Now to build the body of the fly, what we're going to use is some an EP brush, UV EP brush in 1.5 inches. And I've got one piece out of that package. This is my last package of brown. This is my last piece of it. But don't worry, I've got some more coming in from Jay Stalker to be here any day. Better get here fast. I got some more of these to tie. Okay, we'll tie that down right in front of the legs. And we're going to take the thread up to a little bit behind the eyes and wrap the brush so that the fibers extend perpendicular to the hook shank, and then brush them back or stroke them back with your fingers with each wrap. So we'll just palmer that forward. Okay, now we'll tie it down. And snip off our wire. And I'm using some wire snips. These are actually lineman shears. You can use some side cutters, or you can use an old pair of tying scissors that you don't use for anything else besides cutting wire. Do not use your good tying scissors. You'll ruin them. Okay, and then you've got this sharp wire sticking up. We want to bend that back with our fingernail so that we don't hit it with the thread, because it'll cut your thread in a heartbeat. Now we'll wrap back over that little bit to hold that wire in place and tie all that down. Now we're ready for our next to last material that'll finish off her body and form the head. And this stuff is another brush. It's a 1-inch tarantula brush, and it's really cool. It's got the rubber legs built into the brush, and they stick out everywhere and have a lot of movement in the water. Really, really neat stuff. We'll tie that in just ahead of the brown 1.5 inch brush. Bring our thread forward up to in front of the eyes. Stroke those fibers rearward. And we'll get a couple of wraps in behind the eyes. There we go. And then one wrap over the eyes is all we need. This will help make that fly land softer and drop to the bottom without making as much of a splash. We don't want to spook those bull redfish. Okay, now we can tie that down in front of the eyes, just like that. And snip the wire core. Same thing, bend that wire core back with your fingers, your thumbnail, and then stroke all the fibers back and build up a little thread head. Not too big because we're going to add to it here in a minute. And tie down that into that wire. There we go. And leave your thread there at the base of the head up against the eyes as close as you can. Now invert the fly for your last material. The last material is going to be just some EP fiber in a chartreuse, and I've pulled off just a little bit out of this hunk of material. It's about, I don't know how to tell you. It's about diameter. If you squeeze it all up, it's about the diameter of a toothpick. Pretty small. Now the actual recipe for this fly calls to use chartreuse kiptail. Well, I've got some kiptail. I don't have any chartreuse kiptail, so I wanted to use a substitute material. And I chose the EP fibers because they're fairly stiff, and I want this material to kind of stand up here. I don't want it to lay down real flat against the fly. So what I'm going to do is measure up a piece that's a little longer than from the front of the hook to the hook shank, and I'm going to cut that off. We're going to cut it again here in just a minute, but and I don't want the cutoff here to be as real sharp. I want it to kind of feather, so I'm going to pull out some of those fibers to make that kind of tapered. And now I'm going to measure my length. I want that to stick up about to where the hook point is. So I'm going to trim this off. And tie that in. Right. Kind of tricky to make sure you get there we go. Captured all those fibers with the thread. Now we can turn this over. Clean up our head a little bit. Now we can whip finish. And we've got a few fibers sticking out around the eye. We can trim those off. And apply some Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails. Use that as a head cement. With all those fibers from the tarantula brush sticking out, you're going to get a little bit of head cement on some of those, but it's not going to hurt anything. There we go. So we've got some cleanup work to do. We'll take a bodkin and free up some of those fibers from the brushes that we trapped. And then take a brush of some sort, use an old toothbrush, brush those fibers rearward. I need to do some trim work because I want this fly, since it rides upside down, I want the top of it to be fairly flat. I don't want the top to prevent this fly from sitting flat on the bottom. So I'm going to trim some of that material off the top. There we go. And then on our, for lack, Susie calls it a beard, but I'm not sure what I'm going to call it. We'll call it a beard. At any rate, I'm going to trim that up a little bit so it tapers down around the point of the hook. There we go. So there we have the completed Marsh Mud Minnow. Again, it'll ride like this in the water, lay on the bottom, and as you strip it, it's going to have a lot of movement and will really attract those redfish. Good luck tying it and have fun fishing.